Joe Saxton, it is beyond joy to have you here on the podcast. Thank you for making time for this conversation today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. I'm so far really tamping down the desire to A, freak out and fangirl, B, ask you to read things to me, maybe a sonnet. I won't do that, but I just want you to know maybe it's in there.
Sonnet. Maybe a sonnet. Actually, that would be fun. That would be fun. I like sonnets.
I'll find one and you can read one later and give it to our guests as a gift or me as a gift.
There you go.
Joe, you have been a bright light for me in the last couple of years. I met you at a conference. I will tell you, this is an embarrassing story, but I'm in. We were walking in the lobby. This was like the height of, like, we had been in our homes, hunkering in our homes. And this was just one little conference bit. It wasn't a little conference, it was a big conference, but it was just one mini moment in the middle of all that. And you were kind to come and to speak beautifully in a way that just kind of ping-ponged in my head for months and months afterwards. So that's the serious part. The less serious is that you walked by me in the lobby. I feel like I did when I wrote a fangirl letter to CeCe Winans in my youth. It's the only fangirl I've ever done. But you stopped mid-step and said, "I love your outfit."
It was a great outfit, though. Yeah, I remember those things. It was a great outfit.
Okay.
It was an excellent outfit. So I do feel that excellent outfits should be noted, particularly in an era when we were barely wearing pajamas.
Maybe that's why it was such a moment for me. First of all, it was Joe Saxton. And second of all, I thought, I'm wearing an outfit. I'm wearing an outfit right now, a bra and everything. So thank you for that. And thank you for the words that you said. And then you have written words that have just seeped into what I'm doing and how I'm thinking.
Thank you.
So thank you for your work. Now that I have the initial eruption out of the way, can you please tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, how you spend your days, with whom you spend your days?
Okay. I am, I guess, like many of us, I guess, in this moment, I wear lots of hats, as I like to say, lots of things. So I am married to a guy called Chris. I have 2 teenage girls, 14 and 16-year-old. I have a dog who is lying at my feet, smelly and exhausted, and may that just keep him quiet for a little while longer. I write books and I'm a speaker, and I think the primary thing, and I don't think it's always been this way, but the primary thing right now is I coach leaders. I coach, and in this chapter of my life, specifically women leaders. That is the thing I feel probably most called to do right now. And so in many ways, with that being the overarching part, everything else comes under it. When I'm writing books or doing podcasts or coaching, I'm always thinking, how can we empower these women to live into the full capacity of their God-given calling? And are there roadblocks? What are the roadblocks? And how do we pull them out of the way and help them learn to pull them out of the way so that they can live freely and fully and make their contribution?
I wonder how this all began. You write that leadership among women in your family sometimes was not necessarily discovered, but rather uncovered by necessity. So was that the case for you as well?
Yeah, very much so. I often say that I was the last to work out I was a leader. I don't know that I had my perception of what a leader was. And I think at that time, even in my teens, I felt like you had to feel like a leader to be one. You had to feel confident, feel like you had it all together, feel strong, feel like you knew what you were doing and knew everything that was going to happen and have a big master plan. And I had none of those things. And also I had puberty. So that was a collision in my mind. And a distinct problem. But looking back, I feel like all the pieces were there. Like my teachers would always give me responsibilities, and I liked the responsibilities and I could do them well. I just wish no one was watching me while it was happening. Or in sports teams, I would often be the captain of a sports team. And throughout my teens, there was always some position of leadership that was being given to me that I reveled in for a while. They were short like projects type thing. And it was always part of my story, really. So it took me a long while to work it out that I was a leader because I didn't feel like one. But I think all the while I was learning how to lead and learning what leadership looked like and how to serve people and how to lead people and say the hard things or say the encouraging things. Or it's almost like, I sometimes feel like God was like, just don't let her know yet. Don't let her know. It's going to get in the way. So we'll tell her that. We'll give her the punchline at the end. Save it. It's like, oh, is she ready? No. Save it. Push it down further down. Give her another year. And by the time she works out, it's too late.
She's already in.
She's already in.
She's already in.
She's enjoyed it before she had a reason to decide she wasn't. It's too late by then.
So this issue of downplaying, I feel like you're touching on that even at a younger age, that you were thinking, I don't feel like a leader. I can't be. I'll do the things that leaders do, but I'm not really in that space. And we are so good at that. And I'm not sure if I'm Midwestern. I know you live in Minneapolis and you see this play out. Maybe it's that, maybe it's some sort of fake or misplaced humility. Maybe it's because we are women, although I know a lot of men who do the same thing. So I've noticed lately I have camped on the word just. I'm just a stay-at-home mom. Yeah. I'm just a girl from Iowa. I am just blank. And I hear that in the narrative, not just in my own head, but I'm listening for that word lately and it's rampant. So on the one hand, it comes from a good place. I think this kind of just general bafflement when things are going well, that I would feel like, oh, well, that's awesome, but I'm just a stay-at-home mom. Or I'm just this. But I want you to tease out with us and with me why, if we're leaning into that word, that we're just a mom, we're just an introvert, we're just an extrovert, we're just a detail person, we're just a tender heart. Like if we put that in the front, why can that be dangerous?
Yeah, because I think it's almost an apology, isn't it? There's a self-deprecating thing about it, which is saying I'm not. It's like, I'm not this, I'm just that. Right. I'm not this, or I couldn't possibly because we've started minimizing our contribution already, and we don't live beyond what we believe to be true about ourselves. So if we don't think it's possible, if we don't think it's possible we could lead, we won't. And if we treat it like it's some accidental thing that we stumbled into, and don't get me wrong, we stumble on things in life all the time, but to live that way as a habit will mean we won't initiate, we won't take time to research it, we won't wrestle with the challenges. I don't know how I got this job. Well, if you don't know how this got this job, you might not negotiate well for that job. Right. I don't know if, could it possibly be me? If you're busy apologizing for the fact that you're showing up in a room, that will affect how you show up in that room, right? How you volunteer your ideas, and if you keep on putting yourself down, you will ultimately make yourself smaller and make your contribution smaller. And I think there are a number of reasons why we do that. I think women in particular are often socially conditioned to do so. And add Christian on it, and there's a whole other. Then we say God's socially conditioned us to do so, and we minimize it and call it humility when actually it isn't. It's actually quite self-focused. Okay, talk about that. Well, because we're still at the center. You know, the irony is leadership was never actually about us, and pursuing your calling and living into your calling actually isn't about us. It's what the call. Even the phrase "calling" is about somebody else calling you. Yes. And it's a response. Us doing it is a response to how God has wired us, the opportunities he's given us, the things that we see in the world that we're responding to in his name. And it's odd to say that I'm just, is self-centered because we're trying to be humble. Right. But when we keep on putting ourselves down, we stop agreeing with who God says we are. And we stop seeing ourselves in the light of who God says we are. So, I mean, I guess then we have to ask ourselves whether we know better. Oh gosh. And whether he just doesn't get it yet. And if he could just understand that we're just a mum, or we're just a grandma, or we're just you're just good at organizing, maybe then he wouldn't ask this of us, because he doesn't know what he's doing and we do. And because he doesn't understand how we feel inside, we need him to understand that we can't do this. And it's understandable, but before you know it, we are saying that all of this is dependent on the abilities and perception and the mindset I have for it to work, rather than God is inviting you to join him in the renewal of all things. And he is empowering you and coming alongside you. And this is just another outworking of your ongoing relationship with him.
That turns every table upside down in terms of how the word leadership, I think, falls, right?
Yeah.
Instead of this is my initiative, in fact, it's my response to something already wired in me. How does that work in your house? I have 3 teenagers, and you have 2 girls. I have 2 girls. I'm wondering, do you see any of that junk narrative kind of seeping in? I would imagine maybe not if your mom is Jo Saxton, but how do you stop someone in their tracks, or stop yourself in your tracks from buying that stuff?
I mean, we're only human, so I think it impacts every single one of us. And, there are lots of different voices there are the voices. Yes, there's our family context, which is affirming and celebrating and everything. But then you step outside the door and there's school and there's social media and there's your insecurities and there's the fallout you had with your friends, or there's your history, your backstory, and all of these things, your wounds, your conversation with someone who seemed to be putting you down, or the person who actually was making it very clear that they were putting you down, and all of those things. If only one voice was loud enough. I mean, these things are always going on. So I think it's something we just have to be mindful of, not in a defensive way, but not in a okay, the voices are coming to get you, because that's not going to help you either. But I do have to. I constantly say to my kids, "You're fearfully and wonderfully made," and to remind them of their value and their worth, because if not everything that comes at our value and worth and acknowledges our potential comes at us aggressively. Some of it is quite seductive.
Absolutely.
Some of it is just, well, if you just weren't just a little too much, maybe people will be able to hear you better. If you could just do this, if you could just dial yourself down, and no, not forever, just so they can understand what you're saying. If you could just turn yourself down a bit, and maybe more people would listen to you if you would just, and before you know it, it seems so sensible and it seems so wise and it seems so right. But then you are stepping away somehow from the image bearer that you are to be this modification that makes you palatable. And so I think we all have to assess whether our sense of identity and purpose and calling has drifted according to the environments outside us, or how we're feeling on the inside.
Let's move into that a little bit. The idea of faith in particular. You mentioned briefly that there's a whole, we put things on in church that may or may not be straight from Jesus.
Yeah.
So you do a beautiful job in your book, Ready to Rise, which I devoured. So good. And if we can back way, way up to the very early church, you talk about how this is not actually really new news for women to step into who they are and to respond to the calling that God has on them. This is actually really old good news. You talk about how the early church was particularly compelling to women because in that church, women were actually afforded higher status than in the culture as a whole, and opportunity that they weren't given in their wider culture. And then I love that you say, wouldn't it be amazing if the church could someday be known once again as being particularly compelling to women, because it was a place of value and affirmation and empowerment, just like Jesus. I did say out loud on an airplane inappropriately, yes, and amen.
That's so good.
So yes, absolutely. And has the church been that place for you?
Sometimes.
Okay, talk to me.
Sometimes. I think there have been some people that have been a place where they have. I remember when I was in my late teens, I remember a mentor who was particularly like, God has gifted you, just encouraged, almost called out. In some ways, they were the hands and feet of Jesus for me in that moment, of helping me understand what leadership was, helping me understand what giftings were like, helping me kind of make sense of the story in some way of all these people giving me these opportunities, and just affirming and encouraging and training and equipping. I think there were a couple of voices, male and female, who allowed me to be me in that. And encouraged what God had placed within me, and cultivated it, created an environment where me discovering my calling was a healthy and exciting and celebratory thing. As a gift, I didn't realize how important that would be in the years to come. At that point, I didn't realize how rare that was, to be in environments where people looked at your gifts and it wasn't a threat, or you weren't a threat, or that the fact that you as a woman wanted to live in your calling wasn't a sign of unhealthy ambition,
right?
Or a sexual threat because you're a woman in a man's space, in a space that's traditionally inhabited by guys and stuff. I didn't realize quite how challenging. I mean, I was a woman. I wasn't any stranger to sexism. I expected more of the church. I thought, because it had been such a place of healing and transformation, and because when I looked at Jesus and I looked at these women and I looked at how their lives were catalyzed for the kingdom, and how he entrusts them with the message of the resurrection and all these other things, I'm like, well, yeah, right.
I should see that here too then.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It just kind of made sense. Right. So I think, but there were, I'm forever grateful for the people who saw me, who saw my giftings, did not make a commodity out of me or tokenize me in any way. But just gave me space to discover my calling, gave me space to learn and grow. Because I think sometimes when I talk to people about calling, I often hear people expecting of themselves to have the finished model, rather than treating it like when you get your first bike. When you get your first bike, you can't even ride the thing. It doesn't mean it's not your bike. You just don't know what you're doing. And then you have that kind of straight line, which is actually a zigzag, but it's part of the journey until you actually grow into something. When you have a gift, you learn how to use it. You learn you practice, you try. And I was very grateful for being in environments where there was a safe and healthy and celebratory environment where you could develop your gifts. Because later I'd find environments that tolerated me but didn't celebrate me. Later I'd find environments who minimized or were exploitative, not in a way that physically touched me, but in a way where the gifts were useful to other people's ends. The contribution was useful.
Right.
And served their purposes.
So you've seen it done well and seen it done not well.
Yeah.
How do we do this better in our own individual churches, in our own individual communities? I've seen, right? I've seen beautiful things happen with mentors of mine who said the same to me and didn't act like, I think the biggest gift growing up and still today was within a church context, someone looking at who God has made me to be. And just as you said earlier, not saying, oh, if you could just package that a little bit differently, just be a little bit more blank, usually quiet, demure.
Yeah.
So I know how it feels to have folks say that. And I also know just the life-giving moment when someone, male or female, looks me in the face and says, oh, I can see what this is. And here, how can I just blow oxygen all over that fire? Yeah. So if we know both and we've felt both, experienced both, how do we in our individual congregations, our communities, how do we do better by that? Because sometimes I feel like I'm the only one talking about this in my mini culture.
Yeah. And I mean, the world is made up of lots of mini cultures, aren't they? So it's hugely important. I think that I'm learning again, the significance of leading by listening. So I would encourage everybody, first of all, before they do, the first thing they do is listen to the stories of the women who are in their environment, including the ones who are not in their family. And you might find you have to say on more than one occasion that it's that their comments will not incur retribution in some way. You know, so you might have to facilitate a way where things are said anonymously. It depends on what's happening in your context,
right?
But a place where you can hear the unfiltered, unmodified, specific stories of the women will show you what's missing. Will show you where the breaks are, show you where the wounds are, show you what the history has done. Because some of the things that get in the way, we're not always aware of. We're not always aware of when you have that meeting at that time, which everybody's welcome to. Actually, that is the same time as when all the women who tend to be, whether they are working or stay at home, tend to be the primary managers of the home. If that meeting collides, you're never going to see them there. It's not that you didn't invite them. It's not that they didn't want to come. Absolutely. It's just that the time was crazy for them. And we didn't think through whether our leadership pipelines created healthy on-ramps for everybody.
And space for that and a time for that works for them. Yeah. Isn't that funny? That is such a very small logistical question that can put up a huge roadblock in the conversation. I mean, huge, massive roadblock, because it's just there and there's no way around it. And if there's a meeting, has it considered childcare or all these sorts of things, how do you make it accessible? Because actually the men who are in your context have support too. It's just that we're so used to it. We don't call it support now. We call it normal. Right. So I think listening is huge. And then a specific plan on what you've heard. And again, actually, let me pull back. Listening is huge, and hearing the stories and listening beyond the boundaries of your discomfort. Because it may get to a point where it's like, I didn't intend to do that way. Intention and impact aren't the same thing. They're not automatically the same thing. So you may not have intended, and it may not. And here's the thing, and I would say this to every leader, but particularly the guys, whatever the story is, probably didn't start with you anyway. Probably, it could have started on the playground. Right. It could have started with. It could have been the first boyfriend. It could have been it could have been someone. It could have been the first employer. But the key thing is you're in this moment. So what can you do that helps create and facilitate the redemptive journey of somebody's leadership? Right. And listening is key. Creating safe spaces are key. And then and environments where people are able to try and explore. And that will mean I mean, I don't know how you invest and make room for other leaders without having less for yourself in some way. Because, do you know what I mean? It's like, it's the sacrifice involved and assessing those sorts of things. So that's something that you're going to have to pray about. In terms of what is God inviting you to do in the development of people who are seeking to pursue their call. And what does that mean time of day wise? What is it, what are the opportunities that are available? And sometimes we look for that kind of superstar who can do all the things when actually, again, some are uncovered. Right. I like watching I remember when the TV show The Voice first came out. I loved the fact that you couldn't see the person. And now obviously we know this is reality TV. People have been checking out these people in clubs, and I get all of that. But I love the premise of that person's age or size or look is not in question right now. Right now, all you've got is the voice. And I love the fact that in its purest form, those people came from anywhere. Those people came from anywhere. And whilst we lead in different contexts, if we can create and cultivate environments which do not say, you've got to have a certain look, you've got to sound a certain way, you've got to come from this particular place only. These are our default positions, but actually have a way of saying just the gift, just the person, just the character, in fact. That's the starting point. And then we turn our chairs towards you, right? And then we're on that road with you. Yeah. After we have already said, oh, we want the gift. We want you. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Totally. Beautiful. I would love for you to talk to me about something I've gotten wrong my whole life until reading your book. Oh dear. There were a few, but one is the idea of easer. Oh yeah. Yeah. The meaning of that word. And I would also love for you to talk about the Ezer Collective and what has grown out of that.
Yeah. So, I can try to remember where I did Hebrew at college when I was at university. I did Hebrew and Greek for a few years, and I was fascinated by the density of the biblical languages. Just beautiful. And I think because I was trying to wrestle with what I was called to do, I was like, okay, so what does this mean? And it's in Genesis. Well, Genesis has 2 creation accounts. And the second one is the one where we see the first articulation of what a woman is and what her potential is before anything's gone wrong with the world. And most translations will have everything's good except for one thing. Adam's on his own, and it says it's not good for him to be alone. I'll provide a helper suitable for him. And it's the kind of thing that it's funny whenever I read it out and I'm in a room full of women, there's a kind of like, for some are like, yeah, fine. And others who it's like, it just kind of sticks a little bit. It just kind of sticks. Doesn't quite make sense with all the other things.
Right.
And it's almost like, it's not even always a terrible thing. It's just like, because it doesn't seem to make sense when you look at the Deborahs and the Lydias and the Phoebes and the Priscillas and the Julias of the world. You're like, okay.
Well, helper seems so. We have helpers in preschool. Like, is it a day for being a helper? So you're right. It doesn't fit with the whole. It doesn't seem to make sense. The whole thing, I think. Yeah. And
so then when I looked at it in the Hebrew, and I was just and you have this word. I don't know how to pronounce ancient Hebrew, so I just call it Ezer. But
okay, we'll go Ezer.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm wrong.
Here's the thing, Joe. With your accent, you can say whatever you want. You can say Ebenezer.
There are all kinds of things.
We're on. We're agreeing with you. And yes, Ezer. Okay.
And so the fascinating thing is just, again, the density of that word, that it's a combination of 2 words meaning to rescue and to be strong and to save. And I thought, well, there's a start right there, because apparently I thought strength, well, I didn't think it, but I'd heard it, that somehow women being strong wasn't really feminine. And now it's in her very naming. It's in her very naming. And there's this passive perception. And then there's this to rescue and to be strong and to save. There's this activated word. And then looking, when there's a word you don't understand, you look at where else it appears in the Bible and you realize that a couple of times it refers to women. It's the name. And then, but the vast majority of times you see it appear in the Bible, it's when God is delivering his people from their enemies, because God is a refuge and strength and ever-present help in times of trouble. And it's like, it's funny how we've put our version of help. We brought our cultural context to where helping is an assistant, where help is a backup plan in some ways. It's, I just need a bit of help. It's not really anything. And it's great and it's valuable, but it's not any initiative given or anything like that. And it's like, but the context that those words find itself, that's not what a helper was. A helper, it was the nature of the helping, had the power to help. And is a verb as well as a noun, meaning to protect, surround, defend, and cherish, which I thought these words are way more powerful, often surrounded by words denoting strength and power. And it's like, oh, so am I a helper or am I an Ezer? Because, and there we go. And then even the suitable for him part, the word connectu, and again, coming from words meaning corresponding to, rather than I'm going to craft someone who just is for you, who just fits you, rather than someone who is an image bearer like you, who has strength and power, protects, surround, defend, and cherish, who's strong, able to rescue and save, who is suitable, who corresponds to you. Other translations and other word pictures are to stand boldly opposite you. Eyeball to eyeball, one of my friends would say. Eyeball to eyeball. And it's like, oh, that's a very different partnership.
Very different.
It's a very different partnership. And yet and that's before we even talk about positions, but you see women like this all the time. The woman who's raising her kids whilst going through chemo. You see that in her.
Absolutely.
The grandma who's taking care of everybody's kids in the neighborhood. You see that in her.
Mm-hmm.
You see it in the businesswoman, the working mother, the single mother, the woman who's going through IVF again and again and again and again, the woman who is choosing to be godmother whilst mourning silently the miscarriage she's just endured, the businesswoman doing travel and trips, and the entrepreneur. That we see these women all of the time.
Absolutely, we do.
We know
we are
these
those women.
We are those women, and we know those women, actually. But again, because we don't live beyond what we believe to be true about ourselves, if we think that our identity, our God-given identity before anything was wrong with the world, was to be the backup plan, rather than to recognize that we were image bearers. And don't get me wrong, I have no problem in helping out and serving somebody else.
Of course.
It's just that that's not the fullness of the word.
Right. It's just, it's not a complete picture.
It's not a complete picture. Mm-hmm. And hopefully for all of us who are leaders, for all of us who are human beings, we are up for serving and helping and, do you know what I mean, plugging in where people need us. That's just good social skills.
Absolutely. And
that's just good.
That's not if you're not into that, then you need to find another faith as well. Because Jesus was really into that.
Yeah, he was really on that kind of thing. But what we see here is in these two creation narratives is God creating people in his image and commissioning them to rule and reign and to get engaged with the world, to represent him in the world around them. We see him again articulating who the woman is and calling her an Asa. And it's like, which would make sense because she's made in his image.
Right.
So why wouldn't she look like that before anything went wrong with the world? Why wouldn't she be imbued with God-given potential and purpose and calling? But I think what I found every time I've shared that with women, it's like, hold on a second.
Yeah. Excuse me, can we back up? Yep.
And people are like, oh no, the word is helpmate. And I'm like, dude, that is an old Anglo-Saxon word, which has a typo. It's not, let's not, just because it sounds old in English doesn't mean that it's actually the word Asa.
Right.
You know,
Though God bless the old and the English, but yes.
I mean, bring it on. I'm here for it. But that's not the original language. The original language is Asa.
That's right.
And we do, and it's not an obscure word in the Bible. It appears again and again and again and again. So why would we translate it differently just for one particular occasion?
Right.
If we did that with anything else, we'd be like, why are you messing with it though? Because it's really clear consistently through the whole thing. So yeah, I found that to be really helpful for us to remember who we are and to remember whose we are, and to not see our gifting and our very wiring as an accident or as a concession in some way. It's like, oh, God made women like this. I'm not your average Christian woman. I'm like, or I'm not typical. I'm kind of a bit out of the box. And you're like, or you're fearfully and wonderfully made and God actually quite likes you. God delights in how he made you. No mistakes. Now, let's get on with that purpose that he gave you. You know what I mean? Those sorts of things are integral to it.
There's a part of this that makes me instantly mournful for all that we've lost and all that we're missing, right? It's not just infusing something. It's also the extraction, right? It's also the absence.
That's a really good way of putting it. Yeah.
And I ache for us that we're not getting what we could, because we're not hearing that correctly, or we're seeing one teeny part of what that word is. And not the whole thing. And I love that you've created a space for women in particular to talk about this. So tell us about the collective.
Yeah. So the Asa Collective came out of, I mean, in some ways it was the next continuation out of coaching women leaders and stuff. When I would speak at events, I'd often meet women. And again, and let me qualify. I didn't, for much of my adult life, most of my work has been with men. The vast majority. Yeah. And I was often the only woman in the room, only Black woman in the room, that whole thing. And then after a while, spoke at a number of women's events or at those events where I was the only woman like speaking and stuff. Obviously, everybody needs a bathroom break at some point. So I'd go in the bathroom and I'd meet women there. And this isn't what I'm about to describe. It happened multiple occasions. So I'm probably describing an amalgam of all of those. Yeah. And someone would ask me how I started out and what I was doing. how did I find it? And were people funny with you? And how did you know God was calling you to do all these things? And you'd have these conversations, these profound, sometimes people would be weeping, sometimes they'd be, and then someone else would turn to you in the conversation and you're in the bathroom, you're still in the bathroom. Right. And I kind of came away with thinking, these women's gifts and calls are worth more than a 5-minute break in the bathroom. Where they apologetically ask the questions they can, because this is the only moment they have for someone to invest in their calling. Do you know what I mean? It's the only one. It's the only time that they get a chance to talk to someone who maybe is doing something like what they want to do. And it's not even parallels necessarily. It's just somebody leading. Right. And I just thought, well, one, that's not cool. And how can we expect to see women come into the fullness of their opportunities if they don't have spaces to do that? And even in really proactive spaces where I've seen men and women work together, celebrating each other's gifts, I've seen women edit themselves. Because again, it didn't start with those guys in the room. So it felt important to have this moment to retreat, to advance, to pull away with women where they could just say, okay, this is who I am. These are some things I want to work with. I'm going back into my space, whether it's the corporate world, whether it's church, whether it's nonprofit, whether it's the military, but I'm going back with a stronger sense of who I am and the skills and equipping. Because turns out, if you don't skill people equally, they're not equally skilled.
Yes, ma'am.
Turns out.
Yeah.
So so Aza Collective is a 2-day intensive with Christian women who are all leaders. And again, I deliberately have them from all spaces because why not? And even though everybody comes at it for different reasons, the cross-pollination is good. Yes. And it's a time of training, and it's a time of facilitating and group work and people talking with one another. But the first thing I do at the beginning is get everybody to introduce themselves. It's deliberately small, like about 70 women. It's not meant to be a big thing because conferences do a different thing. Right. A wonderful thing, but a different thing, different function. And I get them to introduce themselves, say who they are, where they're from, and what they lead. And for the express purpose of saying you have pretty much felt alone in your leadership. You have always wondered if there are other people like you. Now look around, because there are at least 70 like you, 70 women like you. And that alone, I think for some people could have gone home at that point, to be honest. They're like, all right, I'm good. Right. I'm now, I will pick up my box of Kleenex because I've been lonely doing this, feeling like a freak show for the past 15 years. And now I am normal. And then we go through some various tools and practices together, looking at what it takes for them to grow into their leadership, depending on the theme of Aza for that year. But we always have a networking night because I think it's the US Bureau of Labor and Statistics, which say that women, no, not women. It says that 85% of jobs are found through networking.
I believe that.
And it makes sense, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
But I also know like a bajillion women dislike networking. Yeah. Or at least they love connecting. They love connecting with other people, but leveraging those connections for their own influence suddenly feels like, I don't want to play games. I don't want to do. And I get it. Totally.
Even the word networking is suddenly slimy a little bit. Connecting, horrible. Great. Networking, ugh.
And it feels like, oh, who am I? And suddenly it's, who do you think you are? And why are you pushing yourself forward? And this is a terrible thing to do. And actually, and this is what I rate my male peers for, do it without thinking. They don't even think about it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yep, get to know people. I'll give you my card. You take my card. If I know an opportunity, I'm going to let you know. It's not this big a deal. Right. It's a big deal. It's a big deal for women. I mean? But it's a huge deal for women. So we deliberately have a time where we're networking, saying, okay, everybody, unapologetically. And I remember the first time I did Aza, a woman came up and said, could you tell us what exactly to do, how to do this? Because none of us know. And so I said, well, why don't you tell them what you do and ask if they're, and how would you like to further your business? How would you like to grow in what you're doing? And then this kind of like this explosion of conversations and people were connecting and letting people know of this person they knew. And somebody came along. I remember a woman who was in marketing sat down with a woman who was a speaker and said, okay, I'll give you half an hour right now. Tell me what you want to do. Let's talk about plans, And then there were personal things and, I'm trying to work out how to navigate this kind of balance in my or getting some rhythm to my life as a leader right now. Oh, this worked for me. And do you know somebody who does this? Anybody know someone who's good at this skill? I know someone, I've met someone, connections. And these relationships have gone on way after
Isn't
Razor.
that beautiful?
Way after Razor. People who have, again, across the disciplines as well.
Right.
Across the multiple spaces. And because you can do that. And I think the dilemma is when you are used to being the only woman in the room, and one, it's very lonely. And if you're used to seeing like there's one opportunity, one seat at the table, maybe 2 seats for women, 45 qualified women, then no one gets to be a friend. They just get to be a threat.
Right.
Because it's a game of musical chairs.
Right.
It's a game of musical chairs where everybody, there aren't enough chairs. There aren't enough chairs, and you just got to dance until you get your seat. And it's not even then. It's not even about personal ambition and competitiveness. Then it's about bills you've got to pay, kids you've got to pay through college, parents who have got an unexpected diagnosis who need support and help with their bills. It's about the fridge that broke. It's about the sports thing your kid's doing. It's about your student debt that you are still paying off. Right. It's just not ordinary things. It's just that all 45 of those women have got all of those things too.
Exactly.
So of course you're wanting to put your best foot forward, get as far as you can, because you've got responsibilities.
Right.
And so how much do you share with this woman about the opportunities and the things out there? Because it's not that you don't want it for her, but your mother's
you might
bills.
need it for you. Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Your bills to pay, and your kid's now got this thing, or that, or the kid's broken his arm and something, and all of these things. And it's hard in those moments to recognize that the problem is the room, not you. The problem is there aren't enough chairs. And I wanted to create a space where there was nothing wrong with those women in the room. I wanted to create a space where they got to create different kinds of cultures and take that back to their leadership spaces. I wanted to have a place which could accelerate them, where they could hear and like we talk about pay and how much you're earning and whether you negotiate and how to negotiate. And then if that person doesn't come through for you, what do you do? And how to walk away from that opportunity that is exploiting you, or how you give voice to the discomfort you feel with that particular colleague and why, and what is actually toxic, and to have other women look and say, you know what, that's not healthy. That person's behavior they crossed the line. That's too much to expect of you. And I know it's scary, and we know we've all got bills, so maybe you can't leave straight away, but is it time to start looking?
Yes.
Can we make a concerted effort to start looking on your behalf? I know these people. Let's connect. Let's work out how to do this thing and rise together.
Right. Exactly. That's it. That last word. I think you are trying to, and beautifully reframing the conversation from a place of scarcity and say, and if there are, the chairs are, I can't make new chairs necessarily. Totally. But boy, I can sure scoot my tush over and share it. And totally. I think that's
or build new rooms, or build new tables, build new rooms chairs. And new tables and new chairs.
That's right.
I mean, we can create. But if we don't know who we are, if to go back to what we were talking about at the beginning, if we start in that place of I'm just, or I couldn't. Or who do I think I am? We don't realize that we actually have some agency here to shift the narrative. We actually don't have to stand for these things which cause men and women to not flourish.
That's right.
We actually have that God actually has the power to do something in and through our callings. And we know it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be quick, but it can change the narrative and change the story and the experiences of those around us and those who come after us.
So what happens when you're misunderstood in the middle of all of this?
Oh, well, first of all, I like the fact you said it's a when, because it is a when.
Not an if for me. It's been a when for me, for sure.
Give me a more concrete example or a fuller example.
So my guess is we have people listening who are finding themselves all along this continuum of I'm not enough. I'm too much. I've maybe stepped out in a position of leadership or tried something new and it got obscured. What I was doing became all cloudy and nebulous because someone misunderstood what I was all about. So what do you do? This will happen. So what do we do?
One of the key things that I think that we all need is we need a few people who are our people. Like you need your voices around you.
Yes.
Who are able to cheer you on, who can help you unpack those things, who can say that person was threatened by you, that person just didn't understand you. And that you need those sorts of things. I think sometimes we feel like with our identity, we've got to have it all together in ourselves, when actually identity is given anyway. So it's like, who are your people around you who are reminding you, you come in from I keep on thinking of Toy Story. I can't remember which Toy Story it was. I think is it the last one, or is it, anyway, I can't remember. When they go in, when there's this part in Toy Story where the toys go into this kindergarten, and it looks really wonderful in this preschool, but no one wants to go with the youngest kids, because they're the ones who batter that they love the toys to death. And in the credits at the end, whenever any of the toys have to be in there for a while, then they go under a table where they're fixed up by fellow toys, and patted down and kind of massaged and help and sauce, little spa,
pit stop. Yep.
You've got this. It's okay. It's tough out there. You're going to come home. It's going to be all right. And they send you back out again. And I just thought but I think as leaders, we need that sort of thing, because life can be hard and challenging and hostile, and people can misunderstand us. And if you internalize all of those, if you internalize every word that someone says about you, if you believe every comment that slides into your DMs on social media, if you believe every bit and things that are posed and poised as questions, but are actually there to undermine, you will not get up again. So who are your people that help you? And who encourage you and who challenge you, who say, you know what, they had a point there, but don't disqualify yourself, learn from it and let's move on. Do you know what I mean? That sort of thing. But you need people. And again, that's why it's so crucial for us as women leaders. Even though we don't like networking, we have to be proactive about it. I would say to leaders again and again, who are you going to get to know this year?
Oh, so good.
Who are you going to get to know this year? I'm not saying don't get to know 10. 10, you're not going to do that.
It's not possible.
Just try two. But the thing is, you might have to try 10 to get to. You know what I mean? You don't do the whole, I'm going to pray and see if she feels that way. This ain't Disney. Do you know what I mean? We are not looking for the one. We're just, I mean, this is not it. We're not looking for a divine hand to come and sprinkle some fairy dust and everybody look and know. Don't be weird. Don't be weird about it. No. You know, when we went to school, we just sat next to someone. That was the introduction. Do you know what I mean? It was real basic. Like, oh, they're my best friend because we know each other. No,
totally.
They're your best friend because your parents registered you for that school at the same time as their parents did. And somebody else picked a few names, sat them all down together, put you next to some really ugly chair where your knees knocked, and now you're besties. That's what happened. You didn't look into each other's eyes.
No, you have alphabetical connection.
Totally, that's it.
Last name. Right.
Ask yourself why all your best friends' names begin with S, because yours does. You know what I mean? That's it. That's it, friends.
We're overcomplicating this, is what I hear you say.
We're trying to put romance where it doesn't need to be. That's right. It doesn't need to be there. And we forget that part of the story because we didn't do it, because our parents did that part. So just go and sit down.
That's right.
And then start talking.
Right. And it's not maybe going to work the first time, let's move on down the road. I think I hear that a lot I'm glad you're leaning into that kind of mystical.
We got to set fire.
Get rid of that.
That's right. Set fire to it.
Light
and then
the match.
Throw away the ashes so that no one tries to resurrect it and turn it into some mystery fog.
Totally.
I mean, it's like, oh, it's not there anymore, but we've got these ashes. Maybe we can don't throw them in the air. Sweep them into the trash.
They're gone.
Sweep them on trash day just as the pickup is arriving so they may never be seen again.
You will never see them
never.
Again.
Never.
That sounds like a better plan for sure. I want to ask you about introverts.
Yes.
Sometimes I feel like when we talk about leadership, immediately we think about someone with a microphone or someone who's a public speaker or someone who is an author, someone who has a very public voice. And when you were talking about introducing ourselves, I love it that you post the question, who are you and where do you lead? That's beautifully open-ended. I see in my work many women who, in particular women, but I hear it from dudes too, who say, oh, well, I'm a behind the scenes person. And so they might be able to listen to this conversation and think that none of this applies to them. because they don't speak loudly, or they don't have a platform, or whatever gross word you want to put. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. And I think, again, we've got to get our perceptions of leadership out of Hollywood. Do you know what I mean? In terms of you may be behind the scenes, but without those scenes, nothing's happening. So you have incredible influence. It's John Maxwell who says that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less.
Yes.
When me and my friend Steph, we host the podcast and we talk about leadership being intentional with your influence, like you engaging with your influence. And so it's not a personality type, which means you will find introverted public speakers. You definitely find introverted writers. You will find
phenomenal ones.
Yes. You will find visible leaders and not as visible leaders. I think platform anyway really is about people and who you're leading.
That's right.
So if you're a leader behind the scenes, there will be a team there somewhere, or at least if you don't want to burn out, there really should be a team of people there. How are you working alongside them? You might be in a department that is never appreciated, but honestly, like no one wants to talk about money. Tax day, everybody cares. Do you know?
You better believe it. That's right.
You know, you don't get to decide the significance of your contribution.
That's right.
But the dilemma, but I understand how that happens, because certain things are monetized, celebrated, and have award shows. And that's fine. I get it, but let's not decide the scope of our influence and let's definitely not define the scope of our value on account of the job description. Partly because it's going to change throughout your life. And also because that is a really arbitrary way, because otherwise then it's only the people who are visible that matter. So only people that are visible, that it matters whether they have character, or it's only the people who are visible that have gifting, when actually all of those things matter everywhere.
Absolutely. I want you to put every word of that on a t-shirt. It's going to be a really tiny print on the t-shirt.
And then people are going to be leaning up inappropriately close. So I'm just trying to see. I'm like, get away from me.
No, oh my gosh, that's very true. Good troubleshooting on the off.
We caught it in time.
Really, really well done. I'm thinking of quiet leadership in times where it takes a while for the fruit of that to grow. What's that?
Yes, it's a big deal.
That's what I'm talking about. In fact, we know this in our lives in part because we are parents. I have so many dear friends who are neck deep in diapers and feeding times and up at all hours. And it is hard. It is so difficult in those seasons to remember you are leading. In fact, you are leading this beautiful, silent revolution in your home.
Yeah.
My kids are old enough now that it took a long time. It took a long time to see where any of those moments were headed. And they did not feel linear, and they did not feel purposeful. They felt painful and drippy.
Yep.
So talk to us about the anonymous seasons, right?
You know what I've come to realize, and I was thinking, like, when we look at the Bible, we see these things and these people, and we forget that there are whole years that are condensed into chapters. And years.
Yes.
There are whole, and so even when you get a lot of chapters, like a Joseph, whom you have about 10 chapters,
right?
It still only captures the
lifetime in 10 chapters.
A lifetime.
Yes.
And then you get a Deborah, and you just get one chapter, and done.
Right.
Done. That's it. You get Joanna, Susanna, and Mary, and you just see them pop up for a few verses at a time throughout the Gospels. 3 here, 2 here. Whoa, where are you? Do you know what I mean? Glimpses of their story. And the challenge for us is not to look at their stories and think things are happening all the time for them and nothing is ever happening for me.
Oh, that is so good.
Nothing is ever happening for me. I'm not doing it right. I'm not holy enough. I'm clearly not reading the Bible enough. I'm not praying enough. I'm not spiritual enough. I'm not enough. Oh, here we are again. Not enough is back just like that.
Square.
But actually much of leadership, I think it's a fallacy. I really do, to believe that if we think that the only thing about leadership is the things that are seen, even when you have a public space, Even when you have a public role, if that's what you think your leadership is, then you're in for a really painful shock when you realize that those 20 minutes of speaking might have actually taken 20 years to prepare for.
Oh, and to live.
And to live and to make mistakes and grow. And also, here's the other thing. Bills still have to get paid.
That's
Do you know?
right.
Do you know what I mean?
That's right.
Kids still need to be fed.
That's right.
And conversations still need to happen. And
diapers still need to be changed.
And you know what? It's boring.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it is not just, I never found meaning in the diapers other than it's hygienic to change. Yeah.
It's a kindness to the people around you.
Do you know what I mean?
About it.
You may not find deep meaning in every moment. Now, some people do, and power to them. I love those women who come out with the books about that stuff. Mm-hmm. You'll never find me. Why? Because I have nothing to offer in that area. Mm-hmm. Some things you just do. And I say that not to belittle us, but to remind us that if we get the gift of a long life, a lot of it's anonymous.
That's right.
Except it's anonymous to the people that maybe we're wanting to impress and all that. It's not anonymous to God.
No.
He still values it. And I don't say that to say, so make sure you're doing a really perfect job. I say that to say you are still seen. You are seen. And it doesn't mean you're not a leader because you are spending time changing diapers, but any more than you're a leader when you're spending time sending emails, any more than when you are
on a stage. That doesn't mean automatic leadership either. That's right.
It doesn't mean you're a leader because you speak.
That's right.
That doesn't automatically make someone a leader.
No. Good.
There are those who perhaps maybe did not need that opportunity,
maybe
or needed it,
the mic away.
But shouldn't. Maybe someone perhaps would have been blessed if we'd had a power cut.
Yeah.
Right. Just took it all out without taking out the person.
Absolutely. Leadership is not dependent on how many decibels, right? Where you move into that space, how loud it is. Goodness.
Totally.
No.
And I understand. I say that I understand how we get there because it is the most lauded thing. The public and because we know there is power in a voice, and there are power in the stories that you tell. So I get that it's there. What I'm saying is don't disqualify yourself. And just because society and even the society of your faith community may have a hierarchy, that doesn't mean God does.
That's exactly right. Well, no,
it doesn't mean God does. And it doesn't mean, do you know what I mean? And I don't say that, I'm qualifying all these things because I'm coaching women leaders. I know the kind of pinball thing that happens with this. Do you know what I mean? It's like the idea comes out. It's like, okay, so it means it's not the main thing. So maybe I shouldn't be doing it then. No, it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. So maybe I should. That's not the point.
Right.
I mean, that's not the point. So God may still invite you to do it. And there's nothing wrong with what I'm going to say this. Of course, I like what I do. It would be a terrible life if I didn't want to speak in public. Now, at the beginning, I didn't want to because I just thought this is a terrible idea, God. Leave me alone. And
I can identify with that.
And a terrible idea. I just don't think you understand the stakes here, and all of that. I just don't think you're resonating with my actual life here. But do I like it? Yes, I do. Do I want to do it? Now I do. Yeah, do I have to do it? No, I don't. But so I say that to those of us who are doing these, who want these things, and now feel bad for enjoying it,
right?
Or have a desire to do it. Like we can get in so many leadership knots. We can get into so many reasons why we're bad. Right. Why we're not enough or why we're too much. You're too much because you have ambition. No, you're too much. You're not enough because you don't know what you're doing. No, they're not necessarily true.
Right.
Is God calling you? And with the best of your knowledge, are you taking the next step towards that calling? Are you trying to be faithful with the sense that you have? Right. With the opportunities that are your way, with the desires that may have been placed by him.
Right.
Are you testing it out? You've got to try.
That's beautiful. And the most sound advice about leadership in all forms. I want to know about how you prevent burnout. Because I'm noticing this, right? Once you step into a leadership role, the plates it's not just that the plates are spinning more quickly, there are more plates and more plates.
It can be.
So you touched on this a little earlier in our conversation, that if you don't decide to take care of yourself in a position of leadership, whatever that position is, probably no one else will move into that space with you. You are really the captain of that ship. How do you do that?
I have found a number of things that have been really helpful for me. One is get good at the word no. Learn how to say it. Practice. I used to practice it in front of the mirror. No, I'm sorry, I can't do this. No. I know my natural propensity is to say yes to everything.
Same.
My natural propensity is yes. Of course I can. It's not going to take it. Then I find myself later saying, why did I say this? Do you know what I mean? And so I've learned how to say the word no. And when in my interim, I say, let me get back to you. That often means no. But I just don't have the courage to say it yet. So until I do, I'm not going to say yes. I'm just going to say, let me get back to you, and then remind myself and then say no. You have a choice in that. So that's one. Another thing is burnout often has an internal driver. So what's the internal drive? Is it to prove yourself? Is it perfectionism? Is it you feel you have to? You know, like I grew up in an environment where I grew up in England in the 80s, 70s and 80s, we're not kind to immigrants, something that we see replayed again and again in all our societies in the world because we don't know how to act. But
correct.
But so we would be raised with okay, we know the deal here. We're not welcome here. You've got to be at least twice as good to be treated equally, at least. And I remember talking with my aunts about it when I was a kid. I mean, I was like 7 years old, and it was just the kind of, this is the deal. This is the deal. So you can make a life for yourself. So you work extra hard, but your body eventually cannot handle that. At some point, that's not going to be a good thing for you because you were designed with rest in mind. It's part of your design specifications, no matter how culturally warped and oppressive your environment is. So that's one, but it might be, you work extra hard to be noticed. You work extra hard because that was when you worked extra hard. That's when you heard people were proud of you. That's when you heard love. It may not have been the only time you were loved, but it was the time you heard it. You give more. And let's be clear, burnout happens regardless of whether you have a profession or not. You know, it's not, if only it was limited to the office.
Right. No.
You know, burnout happens when we're trying things that, you know, when we're round pegs and square holes, we're doing the thing that we think keeps people happy, but we're terrible at, and we haven't got any help at it. And we're doing that for a long time. So, and also happens when we don't get any sleep and we don't take care of our bodies. And so I've learned how to say no. I've learned to be aware of the drivers in my soul that will push me over the edge. When I still, you know, whenever I hear in the news or in our community, or when my kids come home with something and I hear the racism again, it's like, okay, I have to be sure, am I going to try and work 2 times and 3 times as hard to prove that we get to be equal?
Wow.
And the problem is sometimes, many times it worked. That's the problem with overwork. Right. That's why
it's a self-fulfilling issue. Yeah.
Why so many women have heard growing up of every ethnicity twice as hard for half the recognition or something thereabouts. And they're like, the bummer was when I was like Miss Always There, always on, always working, people noticed me.
Right.
And so I don't know how to do just 75% because my 75 is actually 120 because, you know,
and that's the formula. And the formula is proven true over and over again. And it's hard to step away from that.
It's hard because the stakes are high because again, you've still got those bills you overperform in relationships. And so you're everything to everyone at all times and all ways, just so people think you're a good Christian woman. And then it justifies you having a calling, and it justifies you being a Bible teacher, and it justifies you having a career and liking those things because heaven forbid, if anything, you know what I mean? If you have dust in your house,
yeah, right.
And so we've got to work out what the internal drivers are. We've got to work out how to say no. And we've got to have other people who help guard those things for us. Because I can justify anything if I'm feeling insecure enough. Boy, or if I'm feeling driven enough. And I remember living when I was single and with my roommates, and there was an opportunity that had come up at our church. And one of my roommates said, you could do this, but can we just stop now? Can you just stop saying yes to things? Because people just keep on coming to you and coming to you and coming to you. And how about you get to have a life?
Did you listen?
I did actually. I did because she was part of my just because you're single doesn't mean you should burn out program.
Yeah, right.
Good. Do you know what I mean?
Good program.
You just so that it's great that you're playing your part so that all the the marrieds have a date night. The marrieds with kids have to have time, and you're available so you can fill every single vacuum. And she's like, no, you can't.
Ooh, she was wise at that.
No, you can't fill out every vacuum. You that's not your purpose to fill in the gaps so that other people it's wonderful, but you get to be a human being as well.
Right.
Every season and every stage of life. Like we are not there to just serve our idols.
Yeah, isn't that funny? We have culturally acceptable idols, and one of them is moving into the empty spaces and working yourself to death. I know that in my own home. That's it. Yeah. It's not as it's a less alarming idol, maybe culturally alarming one, that if I would say, well, I'm addicted to meth, then people know what to do and they scatter to the right groups. Yeah. Batten down the hatches.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
But if I say I'm addicted to work or affirmation or the 125%, that's a blank stare, right? That's not an idol. No. That's just like a
there's no rehab
addiction.
For that.
Right.
In fact, and also they're often celebrated.
That's right.
The thing.
Absolutely.
What do you do with the things that, I mean, God was very clear on having the Sabbath day and keeping it holy, but his people have not been in the Western world. His people in the Western world are like, no, you're a real champion.
Good job.
Right.
Keep at it.
Who's right?
I would say God.
I mean, and yet we live.
Absolutely. Listen, you are speaking straight to my own dirty heart. I very recent, for real. Like I'm serious. A few weeks ago, I sat down our children and said, so the thing is, guys, we've been really good at trying so hard intentionally to do what we need for 9 of the 10 commandments. We've really been swinging for the fences. And for one, I've been openly disobeying God for your whole lives. And no one can see it but us, right? Because no one comes over here on the Sabbath. I'm just working my tail off. So I would love to have you move into another space where you write a book about that. Although God already said it, so I probably don't need Joe to say more about it, but I would read it. You know,
I had a friend of mine who is of Jewish heritage and a believer. She was talking to, I have a digital coaching platform, and she came on as a guest just to talk about Sabbath. And she said, the people of God, when they were enslaved, had no framework for living. They didn't have any chance to have a framework for living. They didn't, their time was not their own. Their bodies weren't their own. Their work was not their own. And then God gives them a framework. And she said, whenever I don't want to take a Sabbath, I have to ask myself, what am I captive to? And we're all like,
gulp.
And she said, what's enslaving me? I mean, and talk about introvert leader whose voice just like, I just have to ask myself, what am I captive to? And what is holding me captive? Where am I enslaved? Because God designed me to be free.
Oh my God.
And I thought, oh Lord. and it's weird because it's a digital thing, and the chat goes silent and then it explodes. You know what I mean? We're all like, because we're not quite sure what to do anymore, because there's no other way to say it. And we're like, I'm captive to work. I'm captive to people pleasing. Oh, I'm still in Egypt.
Totally.
That's what it is.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I had a wonderful teacher once who told me it took God not very long to get the Israelites out of Egypt, just that mini Exodus moment. They were out of there, they were across the Red Sea, and then it took them 40 years to get Egypt out of them.
Yeah.
And I hear that.
Yeah.
Painfully. Yeah. Joe, before I let you go, I want to ask you a couple more. One, what's the win? What's the win for you when you and I are both old and gray and sagging in all sorts of unfortunate places? What's the win for you?
After Spanx,
optional. They're uncomfortable. I can't do
That's true, actually. It's like Spanx or breathing. Okay. Which would you like to do today? And how long can you go without breathing? I read something the other day that I've kind of made my new goal. It starts bad. And it was talking about the impact of the pandemic on women and women's opportunities. And the World Economic Forum have said that the COVID-19 effect has set women's equality back a generation. Now, a generation is termed 30, 40 years, isn't it? 36 to 40 years. And I just thought, you know what? I think God can do something about that. I think God would like to do something about that. I think he would like to redeem that story.
Amen.
So when I think of, I mean, maybe this isn't the win you were looking for. When I think of a win I want, when I'm sagging and that I would like to look back and say, we narrowed that.
I love it.
We narrowed that.
I love that.
In every human flourishing way around the world.
Bring it on. Beautiful. Oh, I'm in with you. And I think there are lots and lots of people listening who are saying the same. I'm on that train. I want to be on that train. Yeah. Last question I ask of my guests. I'm a book nerd. You have written a beautiful book. You've actually written several beautiful books. So I'm assuming you're a little bit of a book nerd too. And so I have a two-part question. What is a book that you recommend on the regular? So maybe it's something you read 20 years ago that you just circle back. And then part D of that question, what's something that's on your bedside table or something close to you that you're excited about reading that you have not yet read and can't wait to dive into?
Oh, I'm trying to find, there's a book called How Women Rise, I think it's called. I'm just going to Google it. Yeah. Is it How Women Rise? Because it's somewhere in this room, but I can't see it on my shelf right now. Yep, it is this. And it is, It's by Marshall Goldsmith and Sally Helgeson, and it's called How Women Rise, Break the 12 Habits Holding You Back from Your Next Raise Promotional Job.
This is the one you've read and you recommend? Or the one that you
when I first read it, when I first read it, I was on a plane and I took lots of pictures of pages. And then when I landed, I just sent it to people and said, you need to get this book. Oh, you need to get this book. And people were reading, they're like, why did you send this page to me?
Ruined my life. I love it.
Why? And I constantly, if people ask me, there's another book by a friend of mine called Kate Coleman, and it's called The 7 Deadly Sins of Women in Leadership. Similar vibe. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Fantastic. So you return to those over and over.
Yeah. I go again and again. I'm like, just buy the book. I love it. Just buy the book. Because it's so practical. It's nuanced. It nuances things for women across different ethnicities. Okay. It's the gift that keeps on giving, and it's practical. And it gives some language to things, just to a number of the stirrings that women leaders feel on the inside of, I just don't know quite. Like there was one where there's a chapter which talks about, about the way you invest in your job and not your career. And so if you're really enjoying your job and you're loyal to your job, but actually there's a whole trajectory, you don't risk anything and step out further in any way. You don't, because, you finally found a place where people like you. And they're like, yeah, but that's not all that's in you. So what are you going to do?
More. Yes,
kind of thing.
Beautiful.
And so just think like that again. And it's like 12 of them. You're like, kind of, so that, that's it. But I mean, and it's actually quite a positive book, really, once you get past the fact that it's reading your mail. Right. And
oh, fantastic. We'll have all the info in show notes for this so people can go pick those up.
And in terms of books that I'm just looking forward to reading, I think there are just authors I'm always like, as soon as I hear, like there was a surprise one. I love memoirs. I loved Mariah Carey's memoir.
Oh, you're kidding.
It was amazing. I mean, it's amazing. And when I think about it, she's an artist, so I should have thought it would be amazing. Yeah. And she has she's very open that she has a writer who helps her with it. Yeah. But it's not even that part. You can tell the bits which are her because partly she sings on the audiobook.
Fascinating.
She narrates the audiobook, so you hear the intonation, the flair, the creative.
I love that.
Her.
So this was audio for you. You didn't.
Yeah. I was just like,
I had a similar experience once with Kristen Chenoweth, who is also a singer. Yeah. And she Yes, but audio. It was the audio that I loved because, again, she breaks into song. You can hear the inflection of the moment.
Exactly.
Loved it.
You hear the tenderness. You hear the catch in the voice. It's powerful. I do love memoirs, but I think there are particular authors. Like whenever Chimamanda Adichie writes a book, she's a Nigerian author. I'm just like, just tell me when it's coming out.
Yes, I'll pre-order. Yep.
I'll pre-order, and whenever the book arrives, I hope there's food in the house because I don't intend to cook that day.
Oh, I love that kind of loyalty to an author.
Like, just let me know when it's coming.
Yes.
I'll be here. Zadie Smith is a British writer.
Another.
And whenever I'm like, whenever you're ready.
She is
count me in.
Ridiculously gifted. I love Zadie Smith.
Her attention to detail and nuance and just like even the book covers, just the whole thing.
I love it. It's an experience from first page to the last. That's
to the last. And then you're like, and now you've left me because I need to know when your next book is here. And because now I'm in this world and I have to imagine the future now without you. So thanks. And when's your next book? Do you know?
I sure hope that you have emailed or done a little video for Zadie and sent it to her because she would love to hear that from you.
Yeah, I'm not sure she would. I might get a restraining order. So I'm just going to let that go.
Such a fine line.
Because it's like, I'm not the kind of like gushy person I'd be like, come on, hurry up. Tell me what's wrong with you? What have you done to me?
Combative. It's a combative compliment. Okay.
It's like, and I'll be like, thank you. And then, and so she may be slightly concerned about is there danger? Is there danger?
Such a fine line between rabidity and kindness. I think you're walking it. I think you're
Turns out there is.
Oh, I love it. Jo, thank you from all of me for this time. You just have been so generous in your wisdom and your storytelling and your smarts and your hope for where we're headed. So thank you. I so appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was fun. Lots of fun.